In this one, I wanted to share the evolution of the power lines over the first 9 months. Here's how it looked when I first moved in, untouched and overgrown. And here's how it looks today. 18 named trails with 48 features. 5 rock, 16 wood, and 27 dirt. Next we'll look at the trail map revisions, and we'll end with more overlays like this to show how it looks in reality. When we first toured the new house, I knew the back end of the property was on a slope in a clear cut under the power lines, but I didn't get to walk it or take pictures until we moved in a couple months later. I started with this satellite image to see the key features of the land, where the green lines outline the property. So the high point is at the bottom right near the return road label, and the fall line runs to the upper left with a ridge near the low point with a gravel road leading uphill. So I sketched several downhill lines that branch to different sections of the ridge line, then merge them together near the bottom to pedal up the road. There's a stump in the field that's about 8 feet tall and 8 feet wide, and I have dreams of building it into a platform with a roll-in start. But in reality, I found it's quite a bit lower than the actual start, so starting on the stump would cut out like the upper half of the area. I still think it'd be a cool feature to build, but it just moved way down in priority. I think this version only lasted a day or two before I wanted to get more detailed, knowing that I had a couple months to move in. So I spent more time than I'd like to admit studying anything I could find online until I could actually scout the area. In Rev 2, I used Gaia and Google Earth to get a better idea of the topography. I tweaked the routings a bit and started to think of trail names and identities. So being under the high voltage lines, I wanted an electric theme. Like I pictured ground fault could have a variety of skinnies. Short circuit would be a pump track near the top where it's flatter, and Usain Bolt could be a fast jump line. Then in the center, I wanted a shared landing with 3 takeoffs, so a right hip in red, a straight air in blue, and a left hip in orange. But spoiler alert, about the only part of this map that lived on were the names. On to Rev 3, where I created routes and waypoints in Gaia and used elevation profiles to influence the routing towards the flat or steep areas, just making sure I wasn't going uphill or being too unrealistic. It also helped me track the features I wanted to build. This is the point where I really started to incorporate the idea of nodes to add variety. So route each trail to give forks and merges in several spots, so riders can mix and match features to create more variation versus just 5 or 6 independent trails. In hindsight, my sense of scale was way too tight, like where ground fault in pink doubles back, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times? We'll look at the actual map in a minute where that area only fits 3 lines left to right. Also, I was very optimistic with the overall size of the features, like 3 big road gaps in blue, orange, and green. That just wasn't ever going to work. Okay, Rev 4 gave some smaller changes, mostly a few new segments to add forks and merges to increase variation. Jump into Rev 5. It was during this one I started measuring more and realized just how tight everything was. I decided to remove some features and space it out a bit. At this point I still haven't surveyed anything in person, so I'm just building ideas based on rough images and measurements, which are obviously not very accurate at this small scale. I really like the look of this map, but only a few of the basic elements ended up being feasible, like Usain Bolt jumps down the fall line and some of the features in the top left. Alright, in Rev 6, I'm finally able to tour the house before move-in, and I took some shots of the actual land. Just from standing here near the bottom of the gravel road, it was clear that most of my sketches would need to be reworked. I thought I could keep similar elements, but everything needed to be opened up and simplified. I still couldn't tell much about dirt's elevation beneath the 5 or 10 feet of brush, but this was really key to putting the area into perspective. So Rev 7 roughly shows the actual trails as of episode 5, the first ride in this series, at least below the road. My plan for above the road completely changed from here. Also, it was clear that I didn't want to extend into the ravine at the bottom of this shot. It turns out it drops off pretty quickly, so there's really no decent way out if I were to drop in there. Let's see, Rev 8 nearly matches the build progress in episode 7. So far there's a decent variety of dirt, wood, and rock features, with a few nodes throughout to pick your path top to bottom. Obviously it bottlenecks mostly through the middle traverse before branching out to the right side. This inspired the next revision to use the hillside above the road to add more options to reach the right-hand steeps. And that brings us to today, Rev 9. This shows the current build from episode 11. The 3D map definitely skews the perspective with it looking like much higher trail density on the right. This is true, it just doesn't feel this extreme when you're riding it. The left or upper section is relatively shallow, and the right or lower section is relatively steep. The hillside falls from top left to bottom right in this shot, so most of the lines actually hit both the left and right parts of the map. I'm working on Rev 10 where I'm looking at adding a few more sections to fill in those biggest open areas on the left side. And that covers the evolution of the trail map. Next up, we'll show some overlays, which give these same colors sketched over the actual features, so you get a much better idea for how everything interacts. Here's the top node. And the east node along the edge of the property. Looking up at the mid steeps. Here are the analogs options. Looking up at the Tina Fey's fork. And turning around to look down it. A bit farther down Tina Fey's at the rock gap. This one looks down from the bottom node. Back to the middle of the road, looking up the hillside. Standing on the takeoff of the Family Jewels Trail Gap. Looking up the hillside from the Ample Flyer takeoff. Looking from the Quantum Leap landing. And zoomed into the bottom section of Family Jewels. Zooming out and panning left to show the bottom runout. Standing on the bottom boulder, looking at the mid steeps. Panning to show the right steeps. Near the exit where the left and mid steeps merge. And the last one looking at the right end, standing where all lines merge towards the road. With that, I've got a big to-do list of things I want to refine, and I'm working on Rev 10, which adds a few more segments and features. Plus, I know I'll want to redo all these overlays once everything is green again in a couple months. I've spent quite a lot of time sketching, designing, and obviously building, and it's been really satisfying to see it all come together. My wife has told me I have a problem. I told her it's pronounced project.